Hello, everybody. Catchy13 with Catchy Gaming, and I found some time to make a video now that I'm working a new gig. But I also had to do some car maintenance today, and I ran into some complications, along with having to wait for some parts for next week. And a large part of what I did today was almost absolutely nothing. I spent over 4 hours taking that lug nut off, and as you can see, I absolutely maimed it because the people who put it on when I went to whatever people I last took it to torqued it on there Manila Gorilla style. If you get that reference, just think Scooby Doo, but older, and nobody cares about it anymore. About a giant ape, which kind of ties into somewhat today's subject. But they also stripped it, so that's what made it really hard to get it off and why it's all messed up because I had to do that to get it out. Anyways, so one of the things I do is I try and play older games or just any games in general, see if I can make a video out of it. And usually by the time I actually get around to being able to do a new video, I forget that I have all this material available. But with Donkey Kong Bananza around the corner, I went, oh yeah, I played Donkey Kong 64. And I'm like, let's do a video on that. So one of the things on top of this whole entire thing is I like to play older video games, not just for content, but to experience them. And this is one that I missed. I played a lot of rare games, renting a good deal of them, but also owning my fair share as well. Not all of them, but a good deal of them. This is one I did not own as a kid. And I kind of just skipped over it. The only time I ever played it, and it was kind of the reason why I didn't really want it, was in one of those kiosks in a electronics store that's actually it's kind of a specialty store in general. They had this absolutely huge electronic area. It was amazing back in the day, and the store's still around, but their console area where this used to be has just been absolutely devastated to the point of unrecognizableness, and it's just kind of sad what happened to it, but it's kind of expected due to the nature of how the industry and what direction it's gone in. I'm rambling. Anyways, I never bought this one, and before Nintendo shut down the Wii U shop, I purchased it. Probably a good thing I bought it on the Wii U version because I exploited the hell out of that save state. But part of the reason why I like playing older video games is sometimes when you do play older video games, you kind of get an appreciation for some of the newer video games. Like playing Mario 64 and then playing Mario Galaxy or Mario Odyssey. And how much better those games play in comparison to Mario 64. Don't get me wrong, I still think the game is fun, and I had fun with it when I was a kid. It just kind of didn't age as well as you would think. The controls aren't as good as newer iterations of 3D Mario games. And that's where the appreciation comes in. You get to see where they improved upon the mechanics, the camera angles, and stuff like that. So, with games from the 64 era, a lot of navigating 3D spaces were a bit odd. Although Donkey Kong 64 came after Mario 64, way after, it feels like they didn't learn from Mario 64 or some of their previous iterations, because Donkey Kong 64 came out after games like Banjo and Kazooie and Jet Force Gemini. I know people have feelings about that game in general. I actually look back on that with fondness, just a little bit. And I guess, in a sense, Donkey Kong 64, yes, has made me appreciate games that came after, but there's a very distinct reason why Donkey Kong games never went back to the 3D level design. and they stuck with the 2D side scroller for decades at this point. Although Donkey Kong 64 is actually the seventh best selling game on the Nintendo 64, this game was not good. It feels inferior in a lot of ways to previous games that Rare has put out, like Banjo Kazooie and Jet Force Gemini, with the camera actually being probably the worst thing in the whole entire world when it came to this game, where it has 3D platforming, I guess, parts, which is where the camera is your worst enemy in this whole entire game, because it doesn't face you square on the back, allowing you to line up jumps. And on top of that, the camera will just shift on its own. And when it does that, it causes your inputs to change what direction you are running, jumping, or anything, making it very easy to mess up where you're going. And I just found it super irritating that this camera just would not hold still, or it wouldn't even line up with your back at all. It was always off to some weird slight angle, so you always have to push the analog stick in some weird, awkward direction in order to be able to just jump in a straight line to the platform that you're trying to get to. On top of that, it has some really awkward, clunky controls, requiring you to combine the Z trigger with the directional arrows in order to do certain things, like use special abilities, like pulling out Lanky's ability to walk on his hands. Or, if you want to pull out your gun, which every Kong gets some kind of ranged weapon, Donkey Kong gets his, I guess, tree trunk, shoots coconuts. And I think everyone's heard the tale of how originally it was a shotgun, and when they showed it to Shigeru Miyamoto, he was somewhat horrified, and then I guess in Shigeru Miyamoto's way, smiled about it and suggested something that he felt would be better, which is how the whole entire tree trunk shotgun came about. But nonetheless, it doesn't translate well to an analog stick, because sometimes when you're pushing left or right to do whatever you need, it's like you want to pull out the shotgun or you want to pull out your Banana Fairy camera. That is kind of a more of a gripe on my part, and that's mainly because the controls were designed around a 64 controller, not an analog stick that can detect multiple directions of movement. But unfortunately, it did not translate into modern game controls at all. And although I have my gripes with the camera along with the controls, some of the gameplay elements just didn't quite go over well. Like, hitting enemies is a bit awkward, and it's kind of confusing because some enemies you can just absolutely devastate, while others, with whatever Kong you're playing, it just takes forever, and it's really annoying to take out these enemies. And all you get to do that is one melee combo and the gun, and or you also get an instrument too, but whatever. It just wasn't fun to do. I mean, yes, you get a moving attack too. I should probably mention that. But it was never enjoyable taking out any of the enemies as any of the Kongs. It's just like a more of an annoyance, especially when they come back. And I guess one of the most annoying parts was the sheer amount of bananas you had to collect. 500 per level. I mean, it was just kind of obnoxious, and you need to actually collect these bananas, like a good chunk of them, per level in order to move on to the next part of the game. But it became extremely tedious trying to find where all these bananas are. And I think in one case, which I don't have this recorded, you had to be playing as Diddy using his rocket pack, which I'll touch on in a bit here. but you had to fly way, way up past into, I guess, near the ceiling of a cave. But because the draw distance is so short on the 64, you couldn't tell it was there. I had to use a guide just to find this one balloon of bananas. So unless you knew it was there or had a guide to tell you it was there, there's no way you would know it was there, that you needed to use Diddy Kong's jetpack to fly that high. And they did that a couple of times, so it was actually really super annoying. And speaking of Diddy Kong's jetpack, they took Jet Force Gemini jetpacking and made it worse. I don't know how, but they did. It was absolutely the most painful and irritating thing I've ever had to do is use Diddy Kong's jetpack in order to fly through hoops and stuff because of the sheer lack of precision controls and just absolute jankiness of it constantly going up and down. It was a horrid experience to use Diddy Kong's jetpack. It wasn't fun at all. I mean, it's a jetpack. How do you mess up a jetpack? Well, I mean, just Donkey Kong 64. That's how you mess up a jetpack. You make it unwieldy and irritating as hell to use. And then there are the mini games. Some of them, they're not really all that fun, maybe slightly entertaining-ish. But when you get towards the end of the game, it just turns into a huge source of annoyance. Like this mini game where you have to trick the beavers into going into the hole, and although there are rules behind it, they don't seem to follow said rules. I don't know if it's because I'm emulating it. And I actually just got to a point where it was just easier to use a reload spot when I knew I wasn't going to get it. But for the life of me, there seems to be like an invisible wall. In order for them to get over it, even though they could be facing it, you can be snapping behind them, they just would not go down this hole. It was super painful to do and to get them to behave when in previous iterations it was more or less easy, but for whatever reason, when you get to the end of the game, they act like there's this invisible barrier and you can't get them down to go die in that hole. It just, I don't know how many times it took me to do this. And right now, you're probably like, yeah, you're doing really well. Not really. I failed this attempt. But the timing on all these mini games just becomes obnoxiously tight in order to get them done to get the gold bananas. And I absolutely, positively hated this one in particular, but a couple of others. Particularly one which I don't have a recording for, but you had to shoot the banana and the lights will go out. You had to do this trick where you pause the menu so you know where it is and you push the analog stick to aim the cannon in the right direction. Yeah, I don't know if it's actually humanly possible to react as fast as they want you to without doing the pause trick. I know, overall, this game was not fun, and I may be pissing in somebody's Cheerios by saying that. I have no idea. I mean, it's really easy to do that in terms of gaming. Just ask the GTA bros. But this game, it just wasn't good, and I already know that I probably would not be looking in on this game with any shape or form of fondness. If I played it back in high school, I'd probably be a little bit more disgusted with it than I am now. I mean, I have a little bit more of an understanding of game development and what goes into it than I would as a high schooler, but this, I still don't like a good chunk of the game. A lot of the design choices and things they did, it just, they weren't good. This game was a slog to get through. I actually walked away for like several months before I came back and finished it again and had to relearn how to play and what I was doing before I could continue playing the game. But no, this was painful, and I understand why they stuck with the 2D side scroller games after this game, because this probably tainted 3D Donkey Kong up until, well, this year and a couple of weeks when Donkey Kong Bananza comes out. But at this point, you can sort of see like a a lack of quality in Rare's gameplay was starting to poke through just a little bit. This game kind of showed that Rare's quality in terms of the gameplay was starting to wane just a little bit. With the camera just being absolutely awful, the overly repetitive one combo you get to attack enemies with, and the awkward controls having to switch to different abilities and how you do that. And I could get into why Nintendo possibly decided to sell them, and I'm guessing it may have started with this game, but that would be a whole entire different video, as well as having to probably go through Conker's Bad Fur Day, because I have no doubt that was probably a deciding factor. I mean, there's probably also some elements in Banjo Kazooie, because yes, it was childish, but it was like childish in a weird way, especially when you talk to Gruntilda's sister and all the hints she gives about what she likes and doesn't like. I kind of see why. That's a whole different video, like I said before, and I might do that, but I'd have to play through Conker's Bad Fur Day and maybe a couple of other titles that they put out on the 64 that I only played a little bit of or don't really have that much of a memory of. And to be honest, although I know Banjo Kazooie is on the Nintendo Switch through emulation, I don't know if it's like pure 64 emulation or if it's more like the Rare Replay version of the game. Because if it's like the Rare Replay version, okay, that's probably decent. But if it's not like the Rare Play version, that's actually the better version of the game is on that disc, along with some of the other games like Jet Force Gemini and Blast Corps, Perfect Dark, Banjo Kazooie, and Banjo Tooie. I mean, a lot of the games were retooled to work better on the Xbox Series X / Xbox One. So, yeah, it's actually the better way to play those games. Don't get me wrong, I like Nintendo, but people have said that their emulation for the 64 is terrible, so I would probably just stick with those. But yep, nope. Donkey Kong 64 was not a fun game. I strongly dislike it, and I understand why they did not attempt another 3D Donkey Kong game up until now. Anyways, if you made it this far into me just rambling around because I didn't have a script for this, thanks for watching. Have a good one.